second in a series we've had with our representatives from the Small Business Administration. This webinar today will be on the Payroll Protection Program of the CARES Act. Today's program is actually being sponsored on a regional basis by most of our regional chambers, including the Scranton Chamber, Wilkes-Barre Chamber, Pittston, Hazleton, Carbondale, Wyoming County, Back Mountain Chamber, Chamber of the Northern Poconos, and our recent addition, the Pike County Chamber, as well as the Northeastern Pennsylvania Alliance. The program is being coordinated for us by Lesson Alive, Valerie Sarah. Thank you, Valerie. Today's program is going to feature remarks and overview on the program from our SBA representatives, Regional Deputy Director Michael Kane, and Lead Economic Development Specialist Rob Goza. The way we'll proceed is we'll ask Michael and Rob begin the discussion with some remarks, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. That's an opportunity for you to type in, if you will, on chat, your questions you'd like answered by our SBA representatives. When they're finished with their remarks, I'm going to begin with a couple of lead questions that came to us from our communications with our chamber members, and then we'll open it up for your opportunities to write in your questions, if you will. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to our SBA representatives. Michael, Rob, it's all yours.
Bob, thank you. This is Michael Kane. I serve as the Deputy District Director for SBA here in Eastern Pennsylvania. Thank you for joining today's call, and thank you to our friends and partners at the Greater Scranton Chamber of Commerce for hosting this. I talked a little bit about this during our last webinar, that we are in unprecedented times, and this crisis continues, and we recognize that small businesses here, continue to be impacted, by the ongoing stay-at-home order and so forth. And I want to reiterate to all of you that you're not alone. The SBA and our resource partner organizations are working together to bring tremendous resources and assistance to help you during these trying times. So today we're going to talk about not only the Paycheck Protection Program, but we're also going to go back over the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, because there's a new component of that program known as the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Advance, which is a $10,000 component that's forgivable as well. So we want to make sure that everybody is fully aware of both of the programs that they have access to. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan is a direct loan from SBA that is specifically designed to provide up to $2 million worth of working capital to small businesses and private nonprofits that have been financially impacted by COVID-19. So we're going to once again provide some high-level specifics about the program, talk about eligibility, interest rates and terms, along with application process. And then, of course, the newest program, the Paycheck Protection Program, just came online last Friday. This program is a little different because it works in partnership with our lending community to provide loans of up to $10 million to help businesses that have been impacted by COVID-19 to cover payroll and other expenses. So, like I said, this is new. This just came online on Friday. It's a program that provides a 100% guarantee the lending community that we work with, and of course this loan is fully forgivable, provided that the use of proceeds is used specifically to cover payroll and other eligible expenses. So we're going to talk about eligibility, what some of the interest rates and terms could be, and most importantly, what qualifies for that loan forgiveness, right? So our goal is to help you to better understand both of these programs, to be successful in the process, and overall to survive what's going on and make it out on the other side. So I just want to say once again, thank you for taking the time today. I think you're going to find our session very valuable. And remember, we're here to help you. We have a great team here in Eastern PA. I always like to say that I have the best group of people in the entire Small Business Administration right here in Eastern Pennsylvania, and my team stands ready to assist you. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Rob Goza, who has a couple of the PowerPoint presentations to go through, provide lots of details on these programs, and we're going to do our best to answer your questions. So thank you. Rob?
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Mike. So my name is Rob Goes. I'm a lead economic development specialist for the Eastern Pennsylvania District Office of the U.S. Small Business Administration. Our federal agency has two major programs directly related to this that Mike has already discussed a little bit. So as he also mentioned, this is kind of still an ongoing process. As I mentioned last week, you might recall, I mentioned we were still rolling out policies and procedures, and so some of these things were subject to change. The reason I'm going to go over these slides is because a few things have been tweaked and changed, and clarification has been provided that might be very useful. So I'm going to just kind of briefly go through these, then I'll tackle the Paycheck Protection Program, and then we'll go right into Q&A. So as I mentioned last time, since March 17th, SBA has declared all states and territories eligible for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Assistance. These loans have a 1-year deferment, so that means your first payment isn't due for a year. And currently, there's an automatic deferment. If you have a disaster loan from a previous disaster, whether it's for your home or your business, there's a deferment in place for that as well. Additionally, if you have another type of SBA loan, a 7A 504 or micro loan, there's a 6-month deferment on those as well. So those are all things that SBA is able to provide to try and help small businesses bridge this gap. So the businesses that are eligible to apply include small businesses, agricultural co-ops, and small aquaculture businesses, as specific as that may sound. Most private nonprofit organizations and faith-based organizations. How much can I borrow? So as Mike mentioned, these go up to $2 million. There are two separate interest rates. The 3.75% applies to small businesses, and the 2.75% is for nonprofit organizations. Both loans have a term up to 30 years. Eligibility for these are based on the size of the business. You basically have to qualify as a small business. There are some very specific ticks to that program. I would guess that just about everybody on this call will qualify as a small business, or you have to be an eligible nonprofit organization. So how can you use the money? You can use these to pay fixed debts, payroll, accounts payable, any other bills that could have been paid had the disaster not occurred. But these loans are not intended to replace lost sales or profits or to expand. What is the EIDL advance? You heard Mike refer to that a little bit earlier. So you can, as part of the application process for the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, you can request an advance of up to $10,000 to come as soon as possible, as soon as they can turn the request. So you have to do that through this new streamlined application. Even if you've already submitted a disaster loan application, if you did not have the opportunity during that process to ask for this advance and you need that, you need to go back in to the new system and reapply. And again, basically, anybody who is eligible to apply for an EIDL at this point is eligible for that EIDL advance. This also can be used to pay the same sorts of things: fixed debts, payroll, accounts payable, and other bills that could have been paid had all of this not happened. Again, it's not intended to replace lost sales or profits or to be used for expansion. But this is a big but. There is no requirement to repay the advance. And this is true even if later on your SBA disaster loan application is declined. So that $10,000 will still be, if you get issued that $10,000 advance and later on you discover that you can't get a disaster loan, that SBA has declined you for that, this piece of it is still something you've used and it's forgivable. So How are these different from other SBA loans? I mentioned some of the other programs earlier, 78504 and the microloan program. This is the only time that SBA makes loans directly, where we are the lender. So all of our other loan programs come through banks, through microlenders, and through certified development corporations for the 504 program. So, and because of that, you do not go to a bank to apply for this program. You go directly to this website, which I'm not going to even try to read out loud. But there is no, and again, if you have not had the opportunity to apply for the advance and you need that, you need to go back into this system and do that. There is no obligation to take the loan if it's offered. So, and there is no collateral required for loans under $25,000. So if you're asking for more than $25,000, that's a different sort of an animal. There is no real estate collateral required for this. There's a blanket UCC1, which will be filed against all of the business collateral. Personal guarantees are required for loans greater than $200,000. And if you have an existing SBA disaster loan, and you can still qualify for an EIDL for this disaster, but the loans can't be consolidated. This is a fairly frequently asked sort of question. It's a pretty straightforward answer. We've talked about eligible businesses, so that begs the question of who is ineligible. So if the primary activity is a business, as defined in Section 18B1 of the Small Business Act, including its affiliates, is primarily agricultural. Neither the business nor its affiliates are eligible for an EIDL. Also, if you are a business that is involved in an illegal activity at the federal level, even if it's legal at the state level, for instance, marijuana, you're not eligible. Businesses whose purpose for being is gambling, so and you know, casinos, racetracks, and so forth, or businesses that derive more than a third of their annual gross revenue from legal gambling activities. That's the short list of who's not eligible. How to apply? Again, this website. If you have questions, you can always email disaster customer service at sba.com. You can also scan and send a paper copy, but I would not recommend that. You can also physically mail in a hard paper copy. I do not recommend that. I recommend using the website to apply. This is something that I should probably constantly reinforce, which is why I put this, why there's a slide specifically for this. Our resource partners, as Mike Keane mentioned, are still working. They are still helping small businesses. They provide free assistance with putting together your financial records, preparing financial statements, submitting the loan application. All of those things are things that our SBDCs, our SCORE, which is the all-volunteer force of mentors, the Women's Business Centers, and our Veterans Business Outreach Centers. I would recommend using one of the first three, however, because the nearest Veterans Business Outreach Center that we have is in Hampton Roads, Virginia. You can find who is nearest to you at that website right there. If you're looking specifically for a small business development center, like the Scranton University Small Business Development Center, you can go right there, or you can simply Google them. They will pop up. So this is, I'm not going to go through this step by step by step by step. There's a bunch of screens involved here, but this is actually what you will be looking at when you log in and start the process online. This is actually screenshots of what the screen will look like. So as you can see, it's a check the box thing. Oops, excuse me. It's a check the box thing. You can, and if you're worried about size, you can actually click on the size standards link. You have to check any of the boxes to verify eligibility. So again, it's a check the box sort of a thing. Then you fill in some basic information here, business name, trade name, that sort of thing, EIN. As you can see, they're looking for gross revenues and cost of goods. It's a pretty straightforward, step-by-step kind of a thing. Once you get farther down the road, it's going to ask you if you're owned by a business entity. This will be the individual owner's name, for instance. If you need to add an additional owner, you can do that. It just kind of, and most of it is tick these boxes accurately, fill this information in, and then there's literally just a checkbox here. I would like to be considered for an advance of up to $10,000, and that's what we spoke about earlier. Then there's a bank name, an account number, and a routing number. You have to make sure you check that little box at the very end after you read that material. That gets you to a summary screen page, and boom. You do have to promise that you're not a robot, and then you hit the submit button. So that is the first presentation that I'm going to go through. That's actually longer because of all of those screens than the Paycheck Protection program. So what is the Paycheck Protection program? This is kind of set up as a question and answer sort of a thing, because that's kind of how a lot of this stuff has kind of, we've kind of tried to take information and apply it to the questions that we've been getting a lot. So this is a loan that's offered through participating lenders. So we're back to the model that I spoke about earlier, where you go to your lender and you find out if they're participating in this, and you access the program that way. It's a pretty straightforward process. A lot of lenders are involved in this. If you find out that your lender is not participating, there's a website, we'll talk about that in a bit, that you can go, well, right here, second bullet, sorry, where you can find a lender. These loans are designed to give business owners a direct incentive to keep their workers on the payroll. And what does that incentive come as? Well, it comes as a loan that, as long as you use it for the things that it's intended for, it can be forgiven. So you'd be able to pay up to 8 weeks of payroll costs, including benefits. Funds can also be used to pay interest on mortgages, rent, and utilities. And you can literally apply, if you're an independent contractor or a self-employed individual, you have to wait until April 10th. But you can apply today as a small business or a sole prop. These are the terms. This is the short bullet list of what the terms are. So the loan can go up to $10 million. The interest rate is 1%. The first payment is deferred for 6 months. The loan maturity is 2 years. There are no collateral requirements. There's no personal guarantee required. There's no borrower lender fees payable to SBA. This program is going to be available through June 30th, but I highly recommend that if this is something that you are interested in, if you're interested in a 2-year, 1% loan that can go up to $10 million where the first payment is deferred for 6 months, you should contact your lender, the bank that you do business with, as your very first step, and see where to go from there. So when I talk about loan forgiveness, that's usually something that gets a raised eyebrow, because up to $10 million forgiven is kind of a surprising thing, right? But it will only be fully forgiven if you use at least 75% of those funds for payroll. So forgiveness of the loan is specifically based on the employer maintaining or quickly rehiring employees and maintaining salary levels. Are you eligible? Well, that's a good question. So if you're a small business with 500 or fewer employees, odds are really, really good that you are. Nonprofits, veterans organizations, and faith-based organizations are also eligible for this. Sole props, self-employed, independent contractors. The idea of this is to ensure that people continue to get paid despite all of the things that are happening, if it's at all possible. So if you don't follow the rules, for forgiveness, what happens? Well, if you use the loan amount for anything other than payroll costs, mortgage interest, rent, and utility payments over the 8 weeks after receiving the loan, then you'll have to repay the loan. If you use less than 75% of the loan amount for payroll costs, you will have to repay the loan. If the borrower maintains staff and payroll at less than February 15th, 2020 levels, that's kind of a magic date. So keep that in mind as well. If in order to qualify for loan forgiveness, again, the full-time employee headcount must be maintained, their salaries and wages must be maintained, and you have until June 30th to restore full-time employment and salary levels from any changes made between February 15th and April 26th. So that's an important process, right? If you have been forced to lay folks off and you're going to use this program and you want to be forgiven, these are very important dates. So you have to look between February 15th. Well, you have to look at what happened between February 15th and April 26th, and by June 30th, you have to have those folks back at full-time employment with salary levels where they were. What counts as payroll costs? Well, that's kind of a no-brainer, but salary, wages, commissions, or tips, employee benefits, including costs for vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leave, an allowance for separation or dismissal, payments required for the provision of group health care benefits. So that goes back to the thing where you can continue their benefits, retirement benefits as well. What counts as payroll costs? Particularly if you're a sole proper and independent contractor, it's wages, commissions, income, or net earnings from self-employment. So that gets us to the Q&A portion of today. But before we go into that, I want to take the first question that I almost always get and answer that one right out of the gate, which is, can I have an EIDL and a PPP loan? So the answer to that is you can apply for both the Eidl and the PPP. However, the PPP's funds and the EIDL's funds can't be used for the same purpose. The Paycheck Protection Program loan has to be used for payroll. So that goes back to that minimum of 75% of the funds received in order to be eligible to be forgiven. And the rest, the other 25%, can be used for those other purposes we discussed. But borrowers who accept both of these types of funds need to document the use of the funds appropriately. I would highly recommend not crossing those streams. If you've already gotten an EIDL, you can still apply for the Paycheck Protection Program. And the one piece of advice I would give folks in looking at this is that these are business decisions. So when you're looking at these, it should make business sense. You should select the loan program that's going to best meet your individual business's needs. You can't hold funds from both programs for the same purpose. That's the bottom line in these two. Now, obviously, we've talked about the differences in terms for these, but just to sum that up, the PPP loan has different terms from the Eidl. The PPP's maximum loan amount is $10 million with a fixed 1% interest rate and a 2-year maturity. The Eidl provides up to $2 million per business, and it's a long-term, low-interest rate at 3.75% for businesses and 2.75% for nonprofits, with a maturity of up to 30 years. So that's really the difference between those two programs in a nutshell. And with that, we'll open it up to questions. I finally figured out how to get the chat back open. I apologize for that. The first question is, will the chamber email your presentation to all members? The answer to that is yes. The second question are, since lenders are so backlogged with apps, can I apply at more than one lender and only take the loan that comes to me first? I would not recommend doing that. It's going to cause, it's likely to cause you some credit issues. Is the Eidl loan available to self-employed and sole props? Yes. As of the 10th, if payroll in February was, say, $50,000 per week, and then because of COVID, it's $20,000, do we need to go back to $50 per week by June 30th to get loan forgiveness? Yes. If a business is maintaining some revenue, though decreased, does this affect the PPP for full business payroll? That's a good question. I'm not sure I understand exactly what the question is, how that's being asked, but I would say that the answer to that is yes. If you're maintaining some revenue, that's just good news on top of all of this, honestly. Where can we find out the status of an application? So you would work with the bank for the PPP program, and you would work with with disaster assistance directly for the Eidl. Do self-employed use the same PPP form to apply? So I think the form to apply is pretty standard across banks and lenders. Let's see. I mean, there's a standard piece of that for sure, although every bank does things slightly differently, I suspect. How is the loan forgiven? You prove that you've used it for what it's supposed to be used for in the case of the PPP. Did you say that retirement contributions count? Yes, they count as payroll costs. If employees don't want to come back during that time frame, but you hired the same amount of people back, I really don't have an answer for that. I think as long as you're back to the way that it seems to be written is, you know, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but you have to have the same level of folks and salaries.
Yes. Rob, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So a borrower would need to bring, you know, their payroll, the amount of payroll back up to that earlier level no later than June 30th in order to qualify for forgiveness.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. The other thing, Rob, and real quick, an earlier question somebody was asking about the form, the application form. So all of the application forms, well, at least specifically to PPP, because obviously Rob went over information related to the online application portal specific to the economic injury disaster loan. The Paycheck Protection Program form is SBA form number 2483, and that's actually on the SBA website. So if you go to SBA, you navigate to the Paycheck Protection Program, there's a link on there specifically for the borrower application form, and that's, again, SBA form number 2483, and that's what a participating lender is going to utilize, along with they have a form that they also need to keep on file for a particular loan application that they're going to utilize as well, and they actually submit electronically to SBA through a system called eTran, where they basically get an approval loan number. And, you know, so one of the other ways that we're trying to make this program quickly and easily accessible to borrowers is that we provide lenders what we call delegated authority. So that means that they do a lot of the work on the front end and have very minimal interaction at the beginning with SBA to speed up the process to be able to get to closing your loan as quickly as possible and getting you the dollars.
So there's another question here that before you hit the mute switch again, that refers to seasonal businesses. There's a question about how to calculate seasonal employees. My general sense of that is that it would have to be, you know, if what you had on February 15th is what you have on June 30, that's kind of what you need to do.
Yeah, that's I got to be honest, Rob. I'm going to need to take a look at that. So here's the other thing, everyone, is that, and I think it's important to understand that the rules for this program only came out last Thursday evening. So we're not even into a week of this here, and that's also on the website. It's called the Interim Final Rule under Paycheck Protection Program, which is a 31-page guide outlining all the details about this program. And I'm guessing that it probably talks about that. I haven't seen that information, or it's not jogging my memory here, but you can find additional information in terms of calculating payroll and so forth. If you're getting an EIDL, for example, in conjunction with a PPP, how those two are going to work together, it's all in that particular guide. Again, the Interim Final Rule.
Gentlemen, I do have a couple of questions I want to toss out there if I can, from our chamber members. After a small business applies for funding and the lender submits the application to SBA, will the applicant receive a loan approval from SBA in addition to the confirmation notification?
That'll come from the bank.
Correct. So with a PPP loan, the approval, if you will, is going to come through the lending institution. They submit the application to the SBA. They receive an SBA approval number, and then of course they're going to notify the applicant. For an EIDL loan, the applicant themselves are going to get an approval directly from SBA.
Okay, and sort of a follow-up on the PPP then, any sense of what the time frame the borrower can expect to receive the funding once the loan's approved by the bank?
So I'm not 100% sure on that. Like I said, I mean, we're barely 2 business days into this. I think that's going to depend upon the institution and how quickly they're able to get to loan closing. The other thing too is the fact that because everybody is under a stay-at-home order here in Pennsylvania, I think it also comes down to a particular institution and how set up they are to do electronic signatures and things like that. So I think that's going to be, and it depends on the institution is probably the best answer.
And then I'm sure this is one that's a little charged.
Hey, can we go back? This is Sonia Smith with SBA. Can we go back to the question the person had about calculating payroll if he has a seasonal business? Because I do have an answer for that.
Sure.
So
if you were, thanks, Sonia.
Thank you for unmuting me. I was like trying to text you and put stuff into the box. Okay, so this is the answer for seasonal. Okay, you're going to calculate your payroll cost either from the time period of February 15th of 2019 through June 30th of 2019, or from March 1st of 2019 through June 30th of 2019.
All right, very good, thank you. If I can, gentlemen, one more on this side before we get back to the chat questions. Do you anticipate additional funds being allocated to the PPP should the available funds be exceeded?
That's a question for Congress. We're a federal agency under the executive branch, and funding comes from Congress it's all legislation.
So if we're in a situation then where we do run out of funding and Congress decides to allocate additional funds to the program, we will continue to execute.
That's all I had. So if you want to.
Alrighty. So back to the chat questions. There's a question here. Can you use Eidl for different payroll weeks than used for PPP? I would be careful about crossing the streams, as I said earlier. And the next, honestly, and that kind of flows into the next question, which is, can the Eidl loan be forgiven at the same terms as the PPP? They have completely separate terms. And I think we've kind of covered that, because the second half of that question is, what are the contrasting terms of forgiveness for both? You're also going to get copies of these slides, so you should be able to take a look at that kind of at your leisure. 501c6 are not eligible for PPP, correct? I know that there are.
That's correct.
Hey,
501c3s.
Sonia, can you weigh in on that?
Yeah. Only 501c3s and 501c19s and faith-based organizations, and of course houses of worship, are eligible for the PPP.
I love how you say "of course," because honestly, I'm still trying to figure out any of these things that would be "of course." But the next question is, does it include the employee portion of benefits or just the employer? I'm not sure I understand that question. Does it include the employee portion of benefits? Yes. The answer to that is yes.
And I just want to add, it does not include federal employment taxes. So that would be like FICA, which is paid by the employer. So that is excluded. Federal employment taxes are excluded.
Does the 75% include employer taxes or just employee gross? I think that just got answered. How long will the application process take? So for PPP, this is brand new. For Eidl, it's a couple weeks old. As quickly as possible. It's going to vary probably from bank to bank and borrower to borrower, because they got to collect all the information and get it in on the PPP side. And on the Eidl side, you could see how fast I kind of whipped through those screens. So as fast as you can fill that out, that's how long the application process takes. I think the real question you're asking is how long will it take to disperse funds. That $10,000 advance is quite quick. But the Eidl loan process has to go through the actual, loan approval process in the Office of Disaster Assistance, and the same thing for the PPP. So it might take a little time. When can disbursement of funds on the PPP be expected? Yep, I knew that question was coming, so that was what I just referred to. Regarding the hiring back of employees, does the employee have to be on a past payroll, or can you? We covered that. One question is, governmental entities or agencies are not eligible for the PPP, and that is correct. What about franchises? If your franchise if you qualify as a small business, then and you are an SBA franchise, you're on the approved list of SBA franchises, then you can. When do we expect the first fund? Let's see. Some of these are kind of repeating. If you've applied through your local bank but you're waiting for more info, I would reach back out to your bank. Does a part-time employee need to be full-time or just brought back fully as to what hours they had before they were laid off? That's a good question. Does a part-time employee need to be full-time? No. My guess is that you have to have your payroll level back at the level that it was.
Correct. Headcount and salaries need to be maintained.
Yep. So it may not
and that would be back to the level from February 15th. Is that correct, Sonia?
Right.
Correct.
Perfect.
If you placed an application, can you increase the amount requested afterwards? You can, but I would probably try to get all of what rather than trying to take another bite at the apple.
Rob, I just want to say, the PPP, you only are able to apply once. So I don't know whether that question was for the PPP or the Eidl. With the Eidl, you are able to have loan modifications. If you receive too much money, you can work with your loan officer to decrease it. If you did not receive enough, Again, with the Eidl, you can work with your loan officer and submit documentation for a higher amount. But the PPP is a one-shot, one-time.
So there's another question here. If you put the wrong email on your PPP application through the bank, can this be fixed on the borrower's end? Yes, by contacting the bank. Can the Eidl loan be used to pay taxes?
No.
I don't think so. Sonia?
No. No.
Well, that was.
It also can't be used. It also can't be used to pay federal debts as well.
Gotcha. PPP application does not include wages over $100,000. Can I still continue to pay employees their full wage through the loan, or only the biweekly portion up to $100K? You're going to have to meet the same level of payroll that you were previously. I hope that answers that question. There's a question here. I understand that the emergency Eidl is up to $10,000, which is forgiven. So this is a question about the advance. Did SBA recently change its position that you can't get the full $10,000? You can only get that if you have 10 or more employees, like a $1,000 advance per employee. So the Eidl is not based on how many employees you have, first of all. Second of all, the Eidl piece of that up to $10,000 in advance is it's really not related. But that is the piece of it that can of the disaster loan that can be forgiven, as opposed to the PPP program, which could be completely forgiven.
Hey, Rob.
Yep.
You know, and I think it's important for the audience to understand too that, you know, we don't have locally, we don't have a whole lot of visibility on, you know, on how, you know, disaster is the disaster assistance group is making, you know, the credit decisions on these, right? Is that, you know, they have their own formulas and things like that they are using in disaster, you know, and they're going to be checking, you know, borrowers' credit and things like that and taking a look at all the documentation. We don't have any visibility on how they're determining what a business is going to qualify for. That's all happening behind the scenes, and that's and that discussion needs to take place specifically between the borrower and the loan officer that they are assigned. Like I said, because we don't have any visibility on that on the local front.
There's some questions I think that were answered previously. So for instance, my lender is not participating. How do I find a lender? There's a website to go find participating lenders that you can go to. How do we get into the disaster app once it's submitted to add info? Or do we wait for an SBA agent to contact us? I would send an email to that disaster assistance website.
Wait a minute. I just want to interrupt. On the Eidl loan, you cannot proceed to the next part of the application. If you saw the application, there were like 5 radio dials on top, and you have to fully complete one to go on to the next section. You cannot save this application. You have to go through it. And at the end, when you submit it, you get an application number. So on this new application that you saw, all the screenshots, there is no information that needs to be uploaded or sent or anything. It's just a one shot, you sit down, you complete the application, and you submit it.
Yep. And Sonia, if I could just add, and if you do have questions in regards to your application or your application status, you need to reach directly out to the Disaster Assistance Customer Service Center. The phone number for the Customer Service Center is 1-800-659-2955, and you'll be able to talk with somebody to ask any questions that you have specific to your individual application.
So the short answer to that would be if you walk away from it and you don't complete it, you're probably going to have to start over. So you kind of want to have everything at hand. to go through that process. But once you're through, it'll take you to that final screen where it'll give you your application number, and so you'll know that you've successfully applied. Let's see. If the loan runs out before we are allowed to work, can our employees collect unemployment again? I don't think that unemployment, I mean, if they're unemployed, that's really a question for the state's unemployment folks. But my guess is if you're unemployed, you're unemployed. Let's see. Do I need to apply for both if I'm interested in PPP? Nope. Eidl and PPP are separate programs. Somebody's looking for the direct phone number. That's in these slides, and Mike just gave it to you as well. Can the PPP loan be used to pay the wages of an owner who is established on payroll?
Yes.
Yes. All the rest of our staff is part-time. Do we need to rehire them, or is this only for full-time employees? You have to meet the same, it's that February 15th magic number. In theory, a business could take out PPP for payroll, then get Eidl advance for rent, utilities, and potentially get it all forgiven. No. Only the $10,000 advance for the Eidl is possible to have that forgiven, and all of the PPP if you use it for payroll. That would be more than 75%, so that would be forgiven. I'm a sole prop and don't have a paycheck. How can this work for me? So you would submit starting April 10th. You can submit, and it's based on those numbers that I discussed earlier in the slideshow, which you'll get a copy of.
Hey, Rob.
Yep.
Hey, just as an FYI, a sole proprietor, of course, can apply for an Eidl and a PPP right now. It's the folks that are 1099s and self-employed that need to wait to apply for a PPP until April the 10th. You know, but as a sole proprietor, they can apply for either program right now.
Sorry, I missed. Yep, you're right. I misspoke. I was confusing sole prop and 1099.
No worries.
As an owner of an S corp, my income is divided between payroll and owner draws. It sounds like I can only use the payroll portion of my income towards the payroll cost calculation for the PPP. Net earnings is not allowable, correct? That's a good question.
That as far as I can tell, that would be correct. Sonia, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, all I know is, you know, you need to provide documentation. So the payroll is definitely easy, and you're doing draws, too. So if, you know, I know some businesses, all they do are draws, so that is their income. You just need to have the proper documentation to show, you know, your payroll tax filings, your 1099s, income and expenses from a sole prop. Does that make sense? Other documentation such as bank records sufficient to demonstrate the qualifying payroll amount.
An S corp with one person and a partner as the only officers with one part-time employee, would we qualify for the Eidl advance? Yes. I would guess so. Obviously, there are. I mean, if you're applying for a loan, so there's a process there, but you would be able to. You would qualify to apply for the Eidl advance. If workers have been furloughed and are collecting more on UC than what they were earning, and they were unable to actually do their work remotely at this time, can they refuse to come back? Yes. You cannot require people to work. If all my employees are 1099, who then applies for the loan? The company or the individual? The individual. My bank has not yet taken my application for PPP. I signed up at their website. They've sent me an email and said they'll get to me when they can, but can I apply elsewhere? Is this normal, or should I look to apply elsewhere? That's a really good question. I think there's a lot of folks working this in a first come, first served basis. You can look at applying elsewhere, but if you've already got a relationship with your bank, I would start working that relationship, not virtually. I would get on the phone with the folks that handle my business at the bank and say, this is what I've applied for. I need to talk to somebody about that. Are there any subordination agreements needed at closing? I am not sure I understand that question.
I would say no, because there is no collateral required for the PPP. Yeah. And for the Eidl, the only thing SBA is taking is a blanket UCC filing on your business assets.
Yeah, there would be no subordination needed in this particular instance.
If an employee is released for performance issues but then replaced with a new employee, can the new employee be used as part of the headcount requirement in PPP? Yes.
Yeah, so long as they were on board on February the 15th, yeah.
What if you submitted an application for Eidl already and haven't gotten any kind of confirmation? I would say if you don't have an application number, reapply. Can you delay acceptance of PPP funds until you are back open with full staff?
No. The whole thing is to bring your people back on payroll now.
Yeah, yeah, that's the whole, yeah. So,
yeah, well, hold on. That way, they need to bring them back on by the 30th of June. Isn't that right?
Correct.
Right.
Okay, so in that particular case, they in terms of quote unquote reopening, you have until June the 30th to bring those employees back.
There's a question about what bills can be paid with this loan. I'm going to refer you right back to the slides, which you'll be getting a copy of. Can you suggest ways to keep records of use of the monies received through the loan?
I would say work with your local SCORE chapter, SBDC. This is women's centered. This is what they're here to help you with.
So that's definitely a correct answer, but I would also make sure, like for instance, if you have a CPA and you're having that conversation with them, that they're up to speed enough on what those important dates are and what those requirements are, so that they can help you make sure that you're documenting that accurately. And I would keep an eye on those two sets of requirements for PPP. The date that you have to be back to full strength, and as well as documenting number of head count and salaries. Can you send the customer service disaster email? Yes, you'll get that with the slides. Any ideas to turn around for Eidl and Eidl Advance? We've covered that. This says, I've submitted 2 applications for 2 businesses. I'm waiting for about 2 weeks, haven't heard anything, no email, etc. If you have a loan application number, I would go back. I would email disaster assistance and just see what the status is.
I would call the 800 number.
Okay. If we furlough 6 employees, will the loan be for only 6 employees or total number of employees? Total number of employees is the answer. How do you show income expenses from self-employment if the applicant's tax return has not yet been prepared for 2019? That's a good question. I would say that I would put it in there.
Well, you should have something on some type of a software program or something that you're able to document.
Correct, because even if you haven't filed your taxes for 2019, you're keeping records. I mean, I hope you're keeping records.
Yeah.
But you know, you're definitely keeping records, and you can utilize that, you know, to make a determination on what that payroll calculation is for yourself.
So the number of questions that are in this queue just keep multiplying. I don't know that we're going to be able to get to all of them. We'll give it the college try here in the next minute. How do you show income or expenses from self-employment if the does this have to be used? Does the loan have to be used upon origination, or can you hold till all are rehired as long as it is by June 30th? You need to start paying people with that money so that when June 30th rolls around, you can show that. How does it work if the business is closed? Do we just need to reinstate payroll while the employees remain home? Short answer, yes.
Yes, by June 30th.
Yes. The $10,000 Eidl emergency grant is limited to $1,000 per employee. This was stated on a statewide SBDC call yesterday. I'm trying to confirm but can't find anything in writing. Can you confirm this?
Sonia, do you know anything about that?
I can't confirm it. And honestly, this is a decision, you know, the advance is up to $10,000. That decision is made with ODA.
Exactly. We don't have any visibility locally on how the Office of Disaster Assistance is making, you know, determinations on how much business is going to qualify for related to an economic injury disaster loan. So, hey, Rob, why don't we stop there, you know, and we can hand it back over to Bob.
All right, sounds good.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Again, this is Bob Durkin from the Scranton Chamber. I want to remind the participants that we will be sending them a copy of this and of the previous SBA Eidl program that was conducted last week. We'll send that along to each of you. Likewise, if you want to pass this on to others, you'll be able to find it on our website, www.scrantonchamber.com/important resources. And it should be available through our partner chambers as well. I want to thank our partners, all of our chamber partners and the NEPA Alliance for participating and promoting this to our business community. I definitely would like to say how grateful we are to the SBA representatives, to Michael, to Rob and Sonia for joining us. This has been extremely informative. I want to remind those on the call that we do have another webinar coming up on Thursday, April 9th. This will be on the entire CARES Act presented by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. You can find that information on our website. And we want to ask you to continue to check our website and the websites of our partners for future webinars and other resources at www.scrantonchamber.com or at your local chamber. Gentlemen, Sonia, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.